Okay. Hi, everybody. This is, believe it or not, December 6th, and I am recording the third lesson for the month of December. And this lesson is the culmination of 6 months of preparation, everybody. This is the assignment I think kids get a little worked up about, but I want to put everyone at ease. This is the final class in our preparation to write a short story. I purposely assign this, usually Thanksgiving, but those of you who have not heard the story, Coppell Gifted and Talented Association, who for the last 15 years have had a creative writing competition, failed to update their website. And I contacted them at the end of October and said, hey, what's going on? So they extended the time. So the due date for the creative writing competition is January 19th, 2024. So why am I telling you this? Well, if I assign a short story in my class, why not? It's mandatory. It's an assignment. Have a 2-for-1, right? Take that story and the one you worked hard on over the Christmas break where you had 2 weeks off. And those of you who don't get it done, and there will be some who just decide to take off. That's what happened at Thanksgiving. I'm still getting essays in, and we had 3 weeks to do them. And I know there's always going to be last minute students who get it done. The deadline is January 19th. So what does that mean exactly? All students are required to submit a short story, not negotiable. I also encourage you, if you are, especially a student in Coppell ISD, it's free to submit a short story for the creative writing competition. In my opinion, it's worth a student's time and effort because you have a competitive advantage. You have a creative writing coach. You've had 6 months of preparation that your peers probably haven't had. So the deadline is January 19th. You have to enter your story with your parents' permission. So after this moment, after I assign this lesson, I'm going to be hands off until January 19th. What does that mean? It means I can't help you anymore. I will not be giving edits for these short stories. I can't. Because if you submit them for the creative writing competition in Coppell, you can't have help. And that's considered cheating. I've done all I can in 6 months to prepare my students. Okay, so you need to make sure you put your language arts teacher's name, not Mrs. Hensel. And believe me, they know my name. Every year I get notified of a winner, and every year I get asked, did you assist them? If so, we will not consider them as a winner. It is considered cheating. They will notify their winners, their language arts, and their homeschool. What does this mean for students outside of Coppell ISD? It's a $20 fee to join the Coppell Gifted and Talented to enter your child in the competition. So for those of you outside of Coppell, you're not, no one's required to do it. But I think $20 is worth it. So let me be clear, this assignment is not optional in my class. Submitting a short story in the competition is at the discretion of your family. If mom and dad are okay with it, and they have to be okay with it because they have to do the work for you. In the past, my students have won. And it kind of makes sense. You put in the time and effort by coming to my class. I think that gives you an advantage. So per the rules, if you send me a short story, and every year I tell students, don't send me a short story, and they send it anyway. Don't send it to me until January 19th. I'll be happy to look at it January 19th when the deadline is passed. I do not condone, nor will I participate in cheating of any kind. I have to trust in the talent of my students that I have prepared them in any way. If I give you edits, it is cheating, and you will be eliminated from the competition. Okay, so you have a link to all the rules and frequently asked questions. So let me just run the rules with you here a little bit. They will give you a specific number, a word count, a minimum, and a maximum. Well, they don't give you a minimum, they give you a maximum. I will tell you, in my class, the minimum is a 1.5-page story. Minimum. Okay. I don't want any less than a 1.5 pages. It is incomplete, in my opinion, if the story is less than a 1.5 pages. It's not well thought out. Okay. For the competition, I believe it's, I have to look up the number, how many characters it is. If you don't comply with the maximum number of characters, your story's eliminated. So make sure you know that number. Most kids don't exceed that. Honestly, it's not been a problem, but just for a very, very few students. Really important topic. Choose a topic, relatable, relevant to most kids, and I mean males and females, and pick a topic that is not inappropriate. They don't want horror stories. They don't want violence. They don't want anything about race or injustice. A nice, easy story, right? Something age appropriate. If you're in 5th grade, write about a 5th grade story. If you're in 7th or 8th grade, write about your maturity level. Don't write above your maturity level. It shows that you don't know what you're talking about. It's always good to write about what you know and write about what you care about. Okay. So this is after 15 stories. This is the time we map out our own. So let me share the screen. Okay. And there is your link. Please take the time to go through the frequently asked questions on the link. I would suggest, ladies and gentlemen, you map out your story. And I've given you kind of a story guide here. Number one, think about your characters, limit your characters. Do you want a protagonist, an antagonist, a minor character? Where's your setting going to take place? Here are some indoor ideas, because a setting can create a definitive mood and a time perspective. What's the message of your story going to be? What's the problem? I mean, you can't have a story without a conflict. What's your problem going to be? Notice what will be the conflict and between whom. What will be your solution? Know it before you start writing it. Map it out. Think about what you want the beginning, when the problem is presented. Usually it's right away. What's the rising, I would even go to the climax. What's going to be the turning point in the story? Okay, what's going to lead up to that? What's going to follow that? What's going to happen after the problem is stored? And how does the story end? Is there, a clear, obvious lesson? Make sure, and I spent lesson 1, 75 mistakes I asked you to fix and correct with punctuation. Make sure your essay, your story is not formatted like an essay. So let me stop share for a minute. Okay. This is the story we're going to talk about today, the fir tree. Short stories have a very interesting, unique way of formatting. Every story I've read to you has a left margin line up. There's no indentation. It's not an essay. It's a short story. Every time there's a change of scene, logical change of scene, like if it's at the evening and then it's in the morning, you're going to skip a line. We talked about this with dialogue. Every time a new person is speaking, they get their own line. And that really helps the reader follow along easily and not get lost, not want to put it down. Okay. I'm going to go back to my share screen. Okay. So just a reminder of punctuation errors. So I'm going to do a story today. Probably won't have time to read the whole story, but I want to show you by mapping out the fir tree and explaining the story elements, what you need to consider in your own story. And I think the more comprehensive you are with your outline, I think the better the story you'll write. So the fir tree, you might recognize this name, everyone, is by Hans Christian Andersen. Okay. He was the one fairy tale author who wrote his own stories. And remember, they were often autobiographical in nature. This one's so clever. This is called the fir tree, and the character is a fir tree, a Christmas tree, an inanimate object, but it is used symbolically to personify human traits. Specifically, never being content with life circumstances. So you'll notice I put that here in the characters. The setting, the where, a forest with other, sorry, that should be fir tree, not first trees. Again, a strong symbol in this story. The forest represents freedom, right? And then after the fir tree is cut down, sorry, spoiler alert, the house where the fir tree becomes the Christmas tree, the decoration, symbolizes a loss of freedom. Okay, the when, this is past Victorian England, English setting, based on the description of the home, the wagons, the horses, the rituals with the servants, and the Christmas tree. The problem, and I do know the story was written, published in 1844, so, and I can put that here, that will help you. Published in 1844. So that kind of gives me kind of an idea of the when as well. The problem in the story, this is so clever, I love this, is an internal conflict with the fir tree itself. Now, the fir tree, I'm going to feel like you're just looking at a screen and I can kind of go over this with my information. I'll just ask that you follow along, is personified. Okay, so the fir tree has human characteristic. He feels just like we do. He has emotions just like we do. And you're going to see a lot of personification in the story. Okay, find my, here we go. So the fir tree is growing in this beautiful forest, surrounded, by the air and the wind and this beautiful natural setting. There are bunnies and swallows and nature, just gorgeous. He's never satisfied with his circumstances and looks instead at others, and he compares his life to the other trees. Okay, so this is symbolic. What a perfect topic, relevant to you today. Remember, written in 1844, it's exactly what happens with school-age kids, with your parents, with the world we live in today. We compare our story, our Facebook page, our house, to someone else. And we feel like maybe someone else has it better than we do. So we complain, we're dissatisfied. Okay, so that's really the problem here. The solution, the problem with the fir tree never being happy with what it had was it was never resolved. And the end of the story, another spoiler alert, it doesn't end well. Okay, all right. So the story begins, plot events, deep in a forest where pine trees go. A small fir tree is unhappy. It wanted to be tall like the other trees growing around it. Okay, so it's a baby. It wants to be all grown up, wants to grow up too fast. The problem is presented as the fir tree continued to grow taller, it complained. And it was filled with discontent, wanting to be like all the other trees. Even though the fir tree grew year after year, and it should have been happy to live in a beautiful forest, it continued to be dissatisfied with its existence. All he wanted was to grow tall and be old. Every fall, the fir tree would watch as woodcutters cut down the taller trees and placed his companions on wagons pulled by horses. And he wondered to himself where they were going. The fir tree asked anyone who would listen, swallows, storks, what happened to the other trees? So in the story, you'll notice rich imagery is shown with personification of the elements. The sunbeam warned the fir to try to rejoice in being young and free. And you're going to see that word rejoice repeated, rejoice. And by the way, that's a lot of the words in Christmas songs. Rejoice, rejoice. The wind was shown to kiss the first tree, and the dew was said to water it with tears. But the fir tree noticed none of the good things going on in its life. The fir tree watched as tree after tree was cut down. Instead of being content to live in the forest in peace, the fir tree longed to be cut down like the others he saw. The fir tree believed it would be better to be cut down than to continue to be left alone in the forest. The air and the sunlight tried to comfort the fir tree, telling it to rejoice in living its life in the fresh outdoor air. But the fir tree chose not to look at the bright side, chose to be unhappy, wishing it was taken away by all the other trees. I think no matter what age you are, you can see the human aspect of this story. The climax, the turning point of the story. You know what's going to happen, everybody, right? When everything changes, that's the fir tree is finally the one that is cut down for Christmas one year. In that moment, you know, he's been waiting for this moment. It finally happens. Guess what? He's not happy. He did not feel the happiness he anticipated feeling after watching all the other trees that had been taken before him. Only when he's cut down does the fir tree lament being taken away from the forest. And lament just means now he wants to stay, right? He's sad about it. He's missing for the first time what he just lost. The other trees, the natural elements, the animal companions. Even the journey to a home was unpleasant. Finally, when the cut fir tree was placed in a large tub filled with sand, it began to tremble in excitement. This is the moment, it thought. Servants came in to decorate the fir tree with ornaments. Bags of colored paper were hung with sweetmeats. This gives you a date. This tells you the date. Apples and walnuts, red, blue, and white candles were attached to its branches. Dolls were placed under the tree, and shining tinsel star was placed on top of the fir tree. The fir tree delighted in all of the attention it received, wondering if life would be like this for it every day. When the children rushed in and stopped to open their presents, they forgot all about the fir tree. When the children rushed in and stopped, the scene ends with an older man telling the story of Humpty Dumpty to the children while they sat around the fir tree. The fir tree expected the same celebration to happen the next night, and the next night, and the next night, and looked forward to what would come next. And we all know Christmas comes one time a year. So here comes the following action. The next morning, after celebrating Christmas Day, the fir tree is dragged out by the servants, thrown on the floor in a dark corner of the attic. Many days and nights passed by, and the fir tree lost track of how long he'd been there. Many days and nights passed by. The fir tree spends his time thinking of the past when he was able to grow outside alongside the other trees in the forest, and he was able to enjoy the nature and his friends. And he admits, for the first time, he did not appreciate what he had back then. Okay, now we're seeing a little bit of remorse. When the fir tree described the life it had to the mice were amazed, exclaiming how happy it must have been to live such a wonderful existence in the forest. This was a defining moment. The fir tree realized he had many stories he could tell the attentive mice about his life in the forest. But the more he talked, the more he remembered what was good about his old life. Because he heard the story of Humpty Dumpty, the fir tree remembered being decorated as a Christmas tree, being the happiest night of his life. And still, the fir tree fantasized about its future. It wanted something different. Resolution. One morning, servants clear out the attic, and the fir tree is dragged out of the darkness, thrown down a staircase, and placed outside. The fir tree mistakenly believed it was going to be able to go back to its old life, as if it was going to be replanted or something. The fir tree rejoiced. There's that word again. When it finally came back into the fresh air, and he could see the flowers blooming and the other trees growing, the swallows flying, and the children running up to it. This time, the children call it an ugly old fir tree and step on its brown branches. Suddenly, the fir tree looked at itself and recognized he was dying. The conclusion, the story ends with a final lesson. The fir tree admits he made a mistake when he did not enjoy his life when he was living it. Now, when it's too late, does the fir tree admit it should have been happy with its circumstances instead of always complaining? The fir tree is cut up into small pieces to be used as firewood. The children seat themselves in front of the fire and enjoy the remaining life of the fir tree until all of the embers and parts of the tree are consumed. So the theme here, Hans Christian Andersen wrote stories about the human condition that were usually autobiographical in nature. So if you do the math, He published this in 1844 when he was a middle-aged man. So his youth was gone, right? Likely he was coming to terms with the end of his youth. So the message of the story is meant to show readers the importance of appreciating the good in your life at this moment, instead of focusing on what could be better later on. Focus on the joy and the beauty in the present moments of life. So an incredible story. Please take the time to read it. It's so cleverly done. I'm going to end class with a story analysis. Throughout its short life, the fir tree was constantly looking for something better, never satisfied. It compared its circumstances to those around it. As it grew, it did not appreciate the fact that it was in a beautiful forest with plenty of sunlight, fresh air, and friends. When it noticed other trees being cut down and taken away, it thought this was the better situation. For this reason, it sought only to be taken away from the forest. Yet when this happened, and it obtained its wish of being cut down, taken away, and decorated, it was still not content. Rather than living in the moment and appreciating the splendor of being wrapped in sweets, colored paper, and dolls, the tree thought about the evening and what was to come. Later, as it attained the splendor of being a Christmas tree, for one glorious night, the tree again thought about what would happen later, rather than being content with having reached its goal. When it is tossed aside and forgotten about, the fir tree still holds on for more. Each moment of the fir tree's happiness was overshadowed by its desire for more, its perpetual state of discontentment. At the end, when the tree is finally removed from the loft and discarded outside amongst weeds and nettles, the irony of its exclamation, "Now I shall live," is clear. The fir tree failed to focus on the many special moments in his life as he grew because of his lack of appreciation for what he had. All in all, the fir tree missed out on a life that could not be reclaimed, never having been content with any of its experience. Unfortunately, this story by Hans Christian Andersen reflects how often humans respond in the same way as the fir tree, failing to appreciate and feel happiness in their present circumstances. So the colored sections throughout the story clearly express this message, which reveals the theme of the story. So I've left you on the bottom 4 suggestions of what themes were intended for this story. Number 1, instead of being happy with what it has and what it is, the fir tree wants more. Andersen's tale teaches a lesson about how we look at the world. Instead of looking at the negatives, we should look at the positives all around us. Number 2, it is a tale about appreciating the good around you rather than always looking forward to better times. Number 3, the moral of the story is to enjoy each of life's moments. Number 4, the fir tree looked at his life with discontent, choosing to focus on what was wrong in his life rather than what was good, or what was right. Because the fir tree focused on what was missing in its life, it actually missed out on the beauty and splendor of its existence. So it really wasn't living in the moment at all. Okay, so this concludes lesson number 3, and I'm going to do one more thing. Share the screen one more time before. So as you go up here, if you click on the creative writing rules, just click on this. Usually it pops up. There we go. There we go. So it's been updated for the 23-24 competition. You'll see the due date here, the deadline. I was going to go in and make sure I found that. You can submit a short story or a poem. A poem is up to you. I just prepared you for a short story. They talk about plagiarism, no cheating, don't copy someone else's work. The teacher will confirm the student work is consistent with their writing ability. To maintain the integrity, entries are not clear to the original work of the student author. They will be removed from the competition. Let me see. If you have multiple versions of the same submission, so if you choose to, you want to update it, The latest one will be the one they accept. Can I tell a story about a brutal murder? No. How long is 10,000 characters? Okay, so this is the max, approximately 6 pages double spaced or 3 pages single spaced. If you're going that far, I wouldn't advise it. It's probably too long. So you'll notice all the questions there. So all the questions that you have, they are answered on their website. Okay. I can't answer them because I don't run the contest. All right. This concludes lesson 3. Good luck, everyone. Just challenge yourself. Write about what you know. Write about what you think other people would like to read about. And take all the lessons you've learned and do the best that you can. That's all anybody can do. All right. Take care.